So today our topic is cataract management and its complications. So the objective of today's session are that at the end you all should be able to describe the different types of cataract surgery, enumerate various types of incisions and capsulotomies. You should be able to describe what are the advantages and disadvantages of various types of capsulotomy, which is one of the major steps of cataract surgery. Again, you should be able to describe which are the different types or what is the classification of IOLs, that is intraocular lenses. You should be clear and should be able to describe the post-operative treatment of cataract operated case, and of course should be able to describe the pre-operative, intraoperative and post-operative, both the early as well as the late complications of cataract surgery. So the treatment aspect. So there are two choices to treat a case of a cataract. One is glasses and the other is surgical removal. But when you will opt for what? So glasses, we don't say it is just an interim management of the functional disturbance that has taken place due to cataract. So once we had seen about the symptoms of cataract and the signs and the progression of nuclear sclerosis, it causes change in the refractive index and it results into secondary myopia. So in an interim period where a patient does not want to get operated, you can give him correction with the change in refractive error. But we are not sure how long that stable refraction would last. So you have to counsel the patient, maybe for one or the other social reason or any other medical problem. If you want to delay a surgery temporarily, we can give relief with glasses. Otherwise, we have to go for surgical removal. But when we tell what are the indications of cataract surgery, so remember, it is not only the vision that decides about whether you will plan a surgery for this particular case or not. Example, say a driver by profession comes with a complaint of having problem with night driving. When you examine, his vision is 6/6. So now if we go along with the criteria, will we operate such patients or not? When you examine, he is found to have a posterior subcapsular, that is a central variety of a cataract, a very dark cataract, but a central one. So, keeping the complaint in mind, will you operate or not? Yes. So, the thing is, first and foremost thing is, what is the limitation cataract causing to a person's day-to-day life decides about whether you intervene with surgery or not, and that requires counseling with the patient, taking the information related to his or her activities that are curtailed with whatever examination inference that you have derived about the grade or the severity of cataract. So that is first thing. Of course, if a cataract is advanced enough which causes visual obscuration, so there will be a case, say a completely opposite scenario where a person is a hyperope wearing +3 glasses from years together, and now just because of the nuclear sclerosis and the myopic shift, he is enjoying vision, the unaided vision near without glasses, and he says, you have diagnosed cataract, but he says, now I am able to see without glasses, why you want me to get operated? So you have to explain the patient that though this is a refractive shift, but your cataract is advanced enough, it is causing just a good near vision, but your distance vision is blurred, you have to again counsel in this terms. So indication is just not vision, but also the routine day-to-day life. Again, certain other secondary conditions, like say if you want to do some retinal procedures, because of the cataract you are not able to get a clear view of the fundus, say you want to treat diabetic retinopathy or you want to treat a retinal pathology like a lattice or a retinal pigmentation, something which is significant enough to cause a retinal detachment, you want to laser that eye and you are not getting a clear view. So in this case is also you have to go for cataract removal. Or for that matter, your cataract is advanced enough. Your patient is not physically fit, but your cataract is advanced enough to cause secondary complications, or it has already resulted into complications like a phacolytic glaucoma, like a phacomorphic glaucoma. It becomes an emergency where you cannot wait. So indications of cataract surgery, it is vision, it is day-to-day obscuration of routine life. again any other associated pathology that has to be treated, and it is not able to be intervened because of the progressed cataract or the obscuration of the fundus view, or say any secondary complications related to cataract becomes the indication for cataract surgery. So I hope you are clear, and this has to be very clearly managed and very clearly noted down and documented, because indications of cataract surgery is something one should very know clearly. So when we think about a cataract surgery, there are two things that happen during a cataract surgery. That is, one is you are removing the abnormal lens, and the other thing is you are replacing it with an artificial lens or an implant that is called as intraocular lens. Right? So this is something very simple. Now going to the classification, broadly we divide cataract surgery into intra and extracapsular. Again, the extracapsular cataract surgery which is done in today's scenario, it is conventional small incision, non-phaco or small incision cataract surgery, your phacoemulsification, and the latest one is your laser assisted cataract surgery. So now understanding each one of them one by one. First, before we go to the definition of it, we will also see which are the important steps in cataract surgery, the major surgical steps. So what do you mean by intracapsular cataract extraction? When the word intra is used, it means you are removing the lens, whole lens, along with its capsule. That is what you mean by intra. When you say it is extracapsular means you are making an opening in the anterior lens capsule. You are removing the nucleus, you are removing the cortex, and you are placing a lens in that opening that you have created, that is in the back or on the surface of the opening that you have created, that is in the sulcus. So that we will again see when we go ahead about the putting of the intraocular lens. So I hope this much is clear what you mean by intra and extracapsular. Again, extracapsular cataract extraction is divided into conventional means you are making a large corneoscleral incision and removing the nucleus, doing the cortical wash and putting the IOL. But as it is said conventional and it is a very large incision, it requires multiple sutures. Next ahead is small incision cataract surgery. So that means you are doing a scleral incision, but the way it is constructed, it does not require number of sutures. Usually it can be even done sutureless, or it can requires one or two sutures. Then comes phacoemulsification. So there it requires a machine that works on a principle of ultrasound, and that is used to remove the cataractous lens. And the same technology ahead where you are using a laser in your steps of cataract surgery, that is your laser assisted cataract surgery. So coming to the important steps of cataract surgery, there are two hallmarks. The first is your incision. What incision you are planning in a cataract surgery? So say if we are talking about a conventional surgery, it is a corneoscleral incision from 10 to 2 o'clock. Right? When it is a scleral incision, when we say it is purely on the sclera, it can be of different shapes. And last is the clear corneal incision that is done in case of phacoemulsification or laser assisted surgeries, where you are just using a clear corneal incision. Right? So how they look? So this is how a scleral incision would look like. If you are doing, say, parallel to the cornea, that is your convex or a smile or a parallel incisions, it will result into lot of astigmatism. So we avoid taking a parallel incision. Right? A conventional corneoscleral incision is across the contour of the cornea. But a scleral or SICS surgery, we prefer taking a straight incision or an inverted C-shaped incision, that is called your frown, or an inverted V shape, that is chevron. The other type that are explained like a trapezoid and J-shaped, even that are not performed. Most common scleral incision are the straight incisions, or at the most the frown variety of scleral incisions, right? The other important step is the capsulotomy. Capsulotomy means when you are doing an extra capsular, you are making an opening into the anterior surface of the capsule. What type of opening you are creating? So when you are putting multiple nicks and making an opening, it is called as multipuncture. When you are just making a flap that opens like an envelope, it is called as envelope capsulotomy. And the other one, or that is the prerequisite for a phacoemulsification or say a laser assisted cataract surgery, it is your continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis. So when you have done a multiple nick and then you tear upon the central part and remove that particular flap, that makes a capsulotomy like this. So that is your can opener. So the word can opener means when you are removing or opening a tin, so the way the ragged margins are there, same ragged ends you have here. So you can imagine and correlate what complications or what outcomes can be encountered if you have such ragged ends. Whenever you are maneuvering, this ragged ends can extend to the periphery, right? So it can result into extension even to the posterior capsule of the lens, which is the thinnest part, and result into secondary complications. Right, so this is one type, but again certain conditions where you cannot go for a continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis, you may partly complete it with doing a can opener. So this is usually done in case of sometimes mature cataracts where the capsule is very fragile and you are not able to complete your CCC. Otherwise, in today's scenario, what is done or what is even attempted is only a continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis in any of your case. Okay. This is an envelope capsulotomy. The only indication envelope when you will do, like you have a very fragile hypermature variety of cataract. That when you, whatever you are trying to put a pressure or a nick, the cataract, sinks because it is a fluid inside. So there, just an opening sufficient enough that you can remove the nucleus. Later on, you cut the flaps with your scissors and put an IOL. So envelope is done only in cases of hypermature variety of cataract. Coming to the capsulorhexis with a needle, or it is sometimes done with a forceps. So initially you are making an opening, you are tearing it like a paper. If you are just holding the edge and trying to move it in a continuous direction, keeping the force towards center, you will get a very smooth round opening. So that is your continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis, and you can see how the margins of the rhexis look at the end. So this is a prerequisite for phacoemulsification. You don't require any ragged ends which can come into your phaco probe and result into subluxation of bag or can result into extension. Otherwise also this gives a very good support for you to place an intraocular lens, right? So when you are doing with the forceps, you are basically holding whatever the cut and elevated flap of the capsule with the forceps and trying to make a circumferential opening, keeping the force towards center with the help of the forceps. These forceps are called the Utratas forceps. Right, so this is important, the use of needle, 26 gauge needle or the forceps, and how it is used in case of making a capsulorhexis. So this is just a summary. Can opener, though easy, but otherwise you have to try to end up putting an IOL in the sulcus because back support or placing in the bag may result into extension to the periphery. The ideal one is your continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis, and it helps you to put an IOL in the bag, gives a very good support. An envelope only in case of hypermature variety of cataract. So when we talked about intra, the way the second step is the nucleus delivery is done. So here you are removing everything. So either you are using a forceps or a vectis and removing whole of the nucleus along with the capsule, everything is out. So there again you are just exposed to the anterior vitreous space, and here you cannot put an IOL. If you have to put an IOL, it has to be either fixated to the iris or it has to be fixated or sutured to the sclera. Right? Otherwise, this is something that was done decades back when we never had a technology advanced like this, what we have today. So there, what the patients were given were aphakic glasses, your +10 glasses. Right? So this is the limitation of intracapsular, but nowadays it is not done. Only say in a traumatic cataract, a very badly dehiscent cataract, completely or subtotally dislocated lenses, we do an intracapsular. So this is how an the wound you see, it is almost half the cornea is open to do an intra. You cannot remove the whole nucleus by making a small incision. So almost 9 to 3 opening has been created. So you can imagine what complications can occur after doing an intracapsular. The number of sutures you see, the condition of the iris that you see, the contour is disturbed when you are doing an intracapsular cataract extraction. So in case of extracapsular, it is not the whole bag is removed, only an opening is created and the nucleus is prolapsed out. Later on, the cortical wash in the bag is done and you put an IOL. So extracapsular, either you manage by making a conventional large incision, or you make a scleral incision, or you make a phaco incision. A phaco incision can be clear corneal or scleral, but it is hardly 2.5 to 3 millimeter in size, because that is the only opening that you require is to engage your probe inside. Whereas in case of SICS surgeries, the scleral incision is around 6 to 7 millimeters minimum in size, and your conventional incision is on the cornea from minimum 10 to 2 o'clock. Because what is the diameter of the lens? If you correlate with your anatomy, it is 9 millimeters diameter. So at least you require that much of opening to prolapse the nucleus out. When you are doing it with a phaco, you are breaking the nucleus, so it requires a small incision. So again, when you are doing, as I told, it is just you are engaging your nucleus into dealing the nucleus, breaking into small parts, and this particular phaco tip will absorb the nucleus, and later on you do with the same thing, you do the cortical wash. So this is how the phaco is initially, it is cut into 4 pieces or say multiple pieces and then absorbed. Now the laser assisted cataract surgery. So there are a number of names given. So whether you call it Falx or Flax, so it is what the laser that is used is your femtosecond laser. And here it doesn't mean that laser is removing the lens, but how you use the laser. So from planning of your incision to marking what opening in the capsule you require, everything is done with the help of a laser. The way the excimer laser is used for removing the spectacle numbers, same way the laser mapping, laser assisted mapping of eye is done. So what location of incision you want, what depth of incision is want, everything is calculated by the machine. And that is marked. So only the surgeon has to go and just put a spatula, the incision will open. The capsule is already marked, you just have to remove the flap. Again, nucleus is chopped out with the help of the laser energy itself. You just have to aspirate the broken up nucleus. But again, a machine like a phaco probes is required to deal the fragments of the nucleus. But everything is done. You don't have to use a manual phaco power and your force to break upon the nucleus. So that is the advantage of laser assisted cataract surgery. So that works on principle of photo disruption. So you see the laser mapping that is done. Every time you have the continuous monitoring on what depth. So that is your picture, the ultrasound picture that you get for the corneal depth and everything with the help of the machine. So you can actually come to know at what level, what depth you are planning your incision. So again, it is completely computerized. The mapping, size of incision, location, length of incision, everything is done with the help of a machine. Okay, but the limitation is the cost. When you say it is a laser assisted cataract surgery, the cost almost goes in lakh. So at present condition, in what situations you have an edge of going or relying on a laser assisted surgery is during hard cataract, wherein phacoemulsification it can cause damage to the cornea when you are using too much of power to deal with the hard nucleus. And in case of mature cataract, where doing a capsulotomy is a big challenge. Or say in case of a polar variety of a cataract, while removing the pole, you have a dehiscence in the posterior capsule. So with the help of a laser, it gives a continuous depth that you are just leaving that particular thin sheet of cataract till the end. You are completely removing everything. And later on you are dealing with that particular polar cataract. So even if the dehiscence occurs, you have removed everything safely and you can, without disturbing the vitreous, you can put the IOL also. So these are few scenarios in which a laser assisted cataract surgery has an edge, because most of the time patient asks, right, laser thi operate thai che ke nahi? Why are you going to use laser? But again you have to counsel about the cost. So if cost is not an issue, of course nothing matters. But if it is an issue, these are the only few scenarios where you have a advantage of using a laser for removal of cataractous lens. So once you have dealt with your nucleus, you have cleared your cortex, the second thing you go is you're putting an intraocular lens. So different types of intraocular lens are available. The normal classification that we do on basis of flexibility is either you have a rigid lens or a foldable lens. So foldable means, now if you are talking about incision of say 2.53 millimeters and you have a lens optic which is around 6.5. So unless and until it doesn't fold upon itself, you will again have to extend your incision while putting an IOL. So that is not a good thing. So whenever you are talking about say a phacoemulsification or a laser assisted cataract surgery, a foldable lens is a prerequisite. Otherwise there is no joy in doing a small incision surgery by phaco or laser, right? Again, coming to the functions. So this is again one more important thing. What the IOL will give? Is it a monofocal, it is a multifocal or a toric? So just let's understand this. Monofocal means a particular lens when you have calculated the IOL power. So once you have decided that particular lens will give you a precision for either a distance vision or a near, the way you have targeted for that particular eye. But it cannot be a magical thing that same lens will work for distance and near both. The same thing what happens is presbyopia. Once you are after an age of 40, either you can see clearly for distance, but for near you require some additional aids. So same way this particular IOL, once put, usually when we have targeted for distance, a patient will require some particular additional glasses for doing a near work. So that is what is a monofocal IOL is. Multifocal means the same IOL works for distant, intermediate distance and your near. So say a patient does not want to wear glasses at all, then this particular lens is choice. But again, one thing one has to be very clear about is it gives you around 90-95% of precision. It is not like 100% accuracy for near, for your mobile or laptop work and for your distance movie watching. It cannot be that. So one has to be practical in understanding that it will be 90% of the time he or she will be spectacle free. For very minute near or very crisp and clear distance, he may have to use glasses. Right? So that is about multifocal. Toric means your lens which corrects an astigmatism. Say you have a +2 or a +3 diopter of astigmatism. Any lens you plan, your residual astigmatism will not help or will not allow you to have a good vision. So toric, of course, is a very good option whenever you are dealing with a case of astigmatism. Right? So corneal astigmatism. We are not talking about lenticular astigmatism. Lenticular astigmatism is going to go off once you are removing the lens. But your residual corneal astigmatism, if it is more than 1 diopter, you can think of a toric lens for having a crisp and clear vision. Again, upon the position. So where you are placing an IOL, it can be an anterior chamber, but again an anterior chamber IOL has many complications and it is not a preferred choice in today's circumstances. But yes, if you have done an ICC where you don't have any other way of managing, a patient is too old, that is one of the possibility one has to keep in mind. Otherwise, whatever options are there are the posterior chamber IOL. Otherwise, it can be kept in sulcus, in the bag, back sulcus, it usually occurs by chance. Usually no one plans putting an IOL in back sulcus. But say if you have an compromised zonules at one place, then you can end up putting an IOL in back sulcus position. So this is how an anterior chamber IOL is. It is fixated in the angle, but because it is the position of the haptics continuously irritate at the angle, that can result into keratopathy. It can result into secondary corneal decompensation. Because of the constant rubbing to the iris, it will result into low-grade inflammation or iritis. And because of this, it can result into secondary glaucoma. So these are the commonest complications of your anterior chamber IOL, that is uveitis, secondary glaucoma, and your corneal decompensation or keratopathy. So this is, on the other hand, you have a posterior chamber in the back IOL. You can see 360 degree the opening in the capsule, right? Faint marking of the capsule you can see, and this is how the support of the posterior capsule is there for the IOL when you are doing a CCC. So again, the last is about the materials that are used. So commonly remember, when you are talking about rigid, it is a PMMA lens. So this is very simple thing that you have a polymethyl methacrylate. So that is the material used for rigid IOL. For foldable, usually it is hydrophilic or hydrophobic acrylic material that is commonly used. Again, we don't prefer much of silicone IOLs because of the complications secondary to it. Again, rollable and all that had, they were in market ahead, but commonly now what is available are, or commonly used are the foldable IOL. There are options where you are using one material for haptic and other for the optic. So that can be a hybrid type. So usually the haptics are made up of PMMA, the optic is made of a acrylic material. That is just to improve the stability of the IOL, and it also helps to an extent to avoid your secondary complications like PCO, that is posterior capsular opacification. So this is the monofocal, multifocal, depending upon the toric IOL come with a vertical line or marking about the toricity of the lens. And these are the various options that here the optic in multipiece. Why you say it is multipiece? Because here the blue color is because of the other material that is used. The optic is made of other. These are all foldable variety of IOL. But these are the different options. Why one has to understand what are the different options of lens available? Because most of the times what question we are encountered is which lens I should go for. And unless and until we are not clear ourselves, we cannot guide our own people what they should go for. Okay? So what is their demand will help us in making them choose what is best for them. So this is yellow, is again helps to prevent the macular damage. So once you are dealing with a case of diabetic retinopathy where you know that the macula is compromised, there this will help to block the UV rays. So that is an advantage, that it will result into or prevent the secondary macular degeneration later on that occurs because of UV light. So this is about how the design of a multifocal IOL is. So there are multiple rings. And this rings helps you to get a transition of vision. So when you are talking of a multifocal IOL, there are segments of lens which are either working for a distance, near or intermediate. So this becomes a very complex neuro adaptation that is required. So all patients cannot adapt to multifocality. If you are a very precise type of a personality where you want everything in place, this neuroadaptations usually can create problem. So why I am putting this is, you have to make a patient clear that it is segmented. All rays of light are not focusing for one particular distance. Say if your 100 rays are going in eye, some of them go for distance vision, some of them go for near, and some of them go for your mobile and laptop. So it has to be a very precision worker, say an IT professional. He won't be happy with a multifocal. You have to explain him about it. But on the other end, a completely housewife, she would be very happy putting a multifocal. So again, what is the demand of a patient has to be kept in mind. So coming to the post-operative treatment. Now remember, the pre-operative workup of a patient requires, when you are planning a cataract surgery, pre-op workup, when we say, that was discussed in your previous lecture again about the management, just a brush up I would like to put it is, pre-operatively what all patient requires. So one is your ophthalmic evaluation and yes, a preparation for the surgery. So ophthalmic evaluation requires you doing a complete visual assessment, the fundal assessment, you doing a detailed slit lamp examination to grade your cataract, to rule out any other secondary corneal pathology or any other problem. And of course documenting tension and ruling out any focal infections. You require precise biometry, that is to calculate the IOL power. For that you require doing a keratometry, that is to evaluate what is the corneal curvature, and you need an axial length assessment to determine the IOL power. Right, so that is a formula, that is a machine-based thing that is done, but one has to remember there are two things. One is your axial length measurement and your keratometry that has to be done before you plan a patient for cataract surgery. Patient, before you take for cataract surgery, we start with antibiotic eye drops, usually 3 days prior to surgery, that is to prevent endophthalmitis. Again, same thing one has to take care in a post-operative management also. You have to counsel your patient that what you require is to put drops for 4 weeks around, and it has to be done with maintaining a proper hygiene. So patient requires a combination of steroids as well as antibiotics. You require antibiotics to prevent your infection and steroid to take care of your inflammation. So now depending upon what your case is, whether you can use a combination or you want a separate drop, it is a surgeon's decision. If I have operated a case of mature cataract with severe inflammation on day 1, I would not go for an antibiotic steroid 1 hourly, rather I would prefer a separate steroid to be kept 1 hourly and an antibiotic which is usually required 4 times a day. Right? So steroids usually are available. We will be discussing the groups when you come for your classes. We have the different groups and demonstrations. So steroids you can remember, one is your prednisolone acetate, other is your dexamethasone. So dexamethasone is available in combination with an antibiotic. Prednisolone acetate is available in combination as well as a separate drops. So whenever you have a severe inflammation, what we prefer is putting a prednisolone acetate eye drops. When your patient requirement is less, you can start with a combination, taking care of the compliance of the patient. When you are putting 2 drops, compliance is going to be compromised. So again, using a combination usually helps. So there you can start with 1 hourly, then switch to 6 times in day 1, but you have to assess what is your slit lamp finding, what is your inflammation, and accordingly you give the treatment. So definitive management in a post-operative care of a patient operated for cataract is your steroids and antibiotic. Other group of drugs are all adjuvant therapy. So depending upon a case, like he is having foreign body sensation, he is having surface dryness, surface irritation, you give lubricating. If he has secondary glaucoma, you give an anti-glaucoma drop, but this is again for a period of say few days or a week or so. Say a patient has a lot of inflammation, you have to give cycloplegic. Usually that also is done for 3-4 days or for a week. Okay, so these are again one more important thing is about the use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. So now once you are using steroid drops in a frequency of 1 hourly, usually you are adding a non-steroidal is not going to help much. But yes, in cases where you are going to, like you suspect a patient could be a steroid respondent, or he could be having a steroid-induced glaucoma, or say steroids are contraindicated in him, or you want to taper off the steroids, or you want to use or decrease the frequency of instillation, there using a non-steroidal is again an advantageous. And few specific indications of using non-steroidal in a post-op period is, say you have operated a case of uveitis or diabetics, where you suspect that patient is very likely to get post-operative complication of cystoid macular edema, To prevent it from happening, you can start in the pre-operative period and continue in the post-operative period also. So that is a word about non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So congenital cataract, just one word that you have to remember, that congenital cataract you cannot delay the intervention. Bilateral cataract you have to operate early because the fixation usually completes by 3 months. So if you have delayed, then patient will be suffering the visual deprivation. Uniocular cataract, again there is a controversy, but once the child is fit, after 2 months of age you have to operate. For up to 2 years you keep the child aphakic. We don't do an IOL implantation till 2 years of age, but you have to manage the child with giving a contact lens and a meticular follow-up. So just going through the complications. So these are the few pre-operative usually expected complications. The most common or the most threatened one is your block-related complications like retrobulbar hemorrhage or your globe perforation or oculocardiac reflex. So you have to know what is oculocardiac reflex, what is the afferent, what is the efferent. So the afferent is your trigeminal nerve and your efferent is the vagus nerve. So this oculocardiac reflex occurs whenever the muscles are stretched. This stretching of muscle occurs when you are either trying to take up the bridle suture or at the time you are doing a massage to the eyeball. This is the commonest time that an oculocardiac reflex occurs. So commonest question that is asked, what monitoring would you do? So that is your hand should be on your pulse. You should be talking to your patient. This requires an urgent management, right? So you have to be very cautious. You have to monitor the pulse of the patient whenever you are giving block or whenever you are taking a bridle suture. Then coming to the intraoperative complications. So while operating, usually either there is a damage to the corneal structures, that is the endothelium. So descemet is detached. Or say while after removal of nucleus or while doing an irrigation or washing the cortex, you have damaged the posterior capsule. So you have vitreous prolapse or say a drop nucleus because through that opening in the posterior capsule completely drops into the vitreous cavity. So these are certain intraoperative complications. Or say you are doing a very traumatic cataract or a hypermature variety, you can completely cause a zonular dialysis. So let's see just how each one of looks like. So descemet damage, you can clearly make out that is some rolled membrane sort of a thing. Whereas a posterior capsule, you can see there is an opening created in the posterior capsule. Can you make out? So this is the once the iris is damaged, this is called as iridodialysis. This can be iatrogenic or sometimes it can be even secondary to traumatized eye. Or you can have complete subluxation of the bag. That is half of the bag, the zonules are completely damaged. So now putting the IOL, how you will place the haptic again is a challenge. So that is called as zonular dialysis. So this intraoperative complications you have to understand. The most threatened early post-operative complication is your endophthalmitis. So this one has to be very clear. The medical management, everything has to be very clear. So just look. So iris prolapse on day 1 post-op. If your wounds are not healthy, if you have not cells still tunnel, you have not prepared, or say a suturing is not proper, this type of an iris prolapse can be seen and this has to be managed surgically. You have to repose it and again do the resuturing part. Or say you have a case, maybe some systemic abnormality where you have blood in the anterior chamber, that is called as hyphema. So this will result into a severe inflammation and secondary glaucoma. So these are the few signs, subtle signs which gives you an alarm of whether patient is having an early infection or not. So just a hypopyon, maybe because of excessive inflammation, But something like you have a wound infection with this kind of hypopyon, definitely it is a case of endophthalmitis. So any hypopyon, you have to see what is your vitreous. When you say endophthalmitis, it is inflammation of the inner coats of the eyeball. So when the inner coats are inflamed, the sign is vitritis would be there. If it is just a secondary, say you have operated a mature cataract, getting a hypopyon on day 1 is also a common finding. But there the vitreous is not inflamed. So you have to be very vigilant and very observant about how the patient progresses. So late post-op complications, too, you have to remember, that is your cystoid macular edema and is your posterior capsular opacification. If you have any intraoperative complications, then you may deal with complications like retinal detachment or say a late corneal endothelial decompensation usually occurs if you have intraoperative problems. But this too, late post-operative complications, you have to diagnose about by judging how the patient's vision is there on follow. So these are the pictures. There are 3 types of posterior capsular opacification, usually a short note for PCO. So which are the types of PCO and how you manage PCO, that much it has to be very clear. So there are 3 types of posterior capsular opacification. One is your Elschning pulse. So you have a droplet-like opacity. The other variety is your fibrous. So that is just a membranous type of a posterior capsular opacification. And the third variety is a Sommering ring. That is, it is in the peripheral part. So if I ask you a question that a patient comes with a posterior capsular opacification, which will not require a management, keeping in mind the morphology, fibrous one, the Sommering rings, or the Elschning pulse. Sommering ring. So it is usually, if it has advanced in involving the center, then of course you have to laser it. Otherwise you can, if the vision is good, usually Sommering ring will not require an urgent intervention. So the management is YAG laser capsulotomy. You have to remember what is the full form of ND-YAG. Neodymium, yttrium, aluminum, garnet, laser. So that is the full form that is asked. What are the uses of ND-YAG in ophthalmology? That is one of them is your posterior capsular opacification. That is YAG PCOtomy. Right? Only in few varieties of pediatric cataract where you have a very dense fibrous PCO requires surgical needling. By most of the cases of PCO are dealt with laser. Right? It is a very small procedure and does not even require anesthesia. So I hope you are clear. Few things that what I want to summarize, you are clear with about how you manage a case of cataract. What are the indications of cataract surgery? Can you enumerate the types of capsulotomy? Can you enumerate the types of capsulotomy?
In extracapsular, we do 3 types of capsulotomy: capsular access, then phacoemulsification.
That is what is required in phacoemulsification. One is your capsular access, that is continuous curvilinear capsular access. Which are the other 2?
Envelope and
envelope and can opener. Okay. Can anyone enumerate the types of incision depending upon the anatomy? Corneoscleral, then
scleral,
very good. And
frown.
Sclera, you have frown, you have chevron, and what is common as done is straight. And in phacoemulsification, you have one more incision, that is your clear corneal. That means you are just directly putting an incision on your cornea so that you have a direct edge. Right? So these are the 3 basic incisions. That is conventional, it is corneoscleral. Otherwise, we are doing an SICS, so that is pure scleral incision. And when you are doing a phacoemulsification, either you have a choice to go for a scleral. Usually it is limbal. We don't do phacoemulsification keeping ourselves too away from the limbus, because when you are going with a probe, it causes lot of indentation. So it is a sort of in between cornea and sclera, that is your limbal portion. Okay, for phaco, or otherwise you have a choice of taking a clear corneal incision. Right? You know about different type of IOL, right? And what are you have to enumerate again, which is the commonest or the most dreaded complication in the pre-operative period? Pre-operative. Before you start the surgery, what complications? Oculocardiac, or that is your block related complications. Your intraoperative complications, can you enumerate 5 complications intraoperatively? What could be the intraoperative complications? Nucleus drop. The last, before nucleus drop, what should be happen? Before the nucleus gets its way into the vitreous cavity, what should be there? What should be dehiscence? You have a posterior capsular tear, or otherwise you have damaged the endothelium. So remember, it is either a damage to the anterior structures, that is endothelium, so Descemet or your corneal decompensation, or damage to the posterior. That means your PC tear, your vitreous prolapse and your nucleus drop. Which are the early post-op complications? Endophthalmitis, any other commonest? Cystoid macular edema is a late post-op complication. So early usually is you have a uveitis on day 1. So that is the most commonest, iritis, uveitis, whatever you say. Second is you can have hyphema or say a wound gaping, iris prolapse secondary to that wound gaping. If you have a prolapsed iris, if you have a wound gape, it will result into a shallow anterior chamber or a flat anterior chamber, right? Certain other things like you can have a displaced IOL or a subluxated IOL. So these are the certain things that you see in an early post-op period. And of course your secondary glaucoma. If you have inflammation, you will be having secondary glaucoma in the early post-op part. The late post-op complications can be your cystoid macular edema, your posterior capsular opacification, or maybe you have a complicated surgery, you can have a retinal detachment. Okay? So just few topics. Of course, you should know which are the 3 different types of PCO and the laser that is used for managing the posterior capsular opacification. So just an open consideration about the discussion about when to consider surgery. So we have discussed about what are the indications. So when you will consider the surgery in case of cataract? Mike, can you please pass on the mic? So which are the indications of cataract surgery?
Based on occupation, the need of the patient of using
Okay,
the
so
visual acuity
how
loss.
much day-to-day activities are curtailed by cataract? That is one deciding factor. Then,
Depending on visual acuity,
depends upon the visual acuity. Then,
advancement of cataract, hypermetroma.
what is the cataract grading? Then, any other secondary interventions that you want to plan after cataract decides about cataract surgery? Yesterday you have learned about. So say you have a case of diabetic retinopathy who requires a panretinal photocoagulation, but he has a posterior capsular opacification and does not allow a clear view of the fundus. So does that determine you to go for a cataract surgery first?
Yes.
Right? So you have to think about secondary involvement to any retinal procedure or any other thing. But because of cataract, you are not able to get a clear view, you have to do. It can be even a 2-stage procedure. You do a cataract and you do a retinal procedure in the same sitting. You have a retinal detachment and a cataract, you do it in a same sitting. That is a possibility. But these are the indications that you have to keep in mind. Okay, this is one very important question. Doctor, મોતિયો પાકી ગયો છે? So and if you say no, it is not mature, then should I wait till it gets mature? Because this is the mentality that is prevailing in the society till date. So what will be your answer? Because you have not attended or you are not clear about the complications related to cataract that were discussed with the previous section, So if you remember that, what happens with or what are the complications of mature cataract? That is usually the question, short note question that we ask. This will answer the particular question. What happens when you have a mature cataract? Okay, which step is difficult in case you are dealing with a mature cataract? So one is your capsulotomy, that is difficult. Otherwise, when with maturity, your zonules get dehiscent. They have bear the weight of that heavy lens throughout. So that zonular weakness is there. Even those zonules, when you are trying to do a nucleus manipulation, you can result into zonular dialysis. If you have not been able to achieve a good capsular access, placement of an IOL can be difficult in absence of doing a capsulotomy, in absence of having a good zonular support. So usually nowadays with the technology that we have, we don't allow the cataract to become mature. If it is significant enough to cause a visual obscuration, that is the time you need to go for surgery. That is what a patient and the relatives should know. Many a times the relatives want you to answer to the patient that it is better to wait because they have many other issues. But you have to be very clear when you are counseling a case when to intervene. Okay. Which surgery you should go for? Phaco or a non-phaco, that is SICS. Why? Mike. Why?
In phaco, there will be a smaller incision, so
Very
a smaller, there will be no sutures.
Yes. So once you have a small incision, usually don't require suture to seal it. It is usually self-sealing.
Yeah.
Second thing is any wound related issue. So a larger wound requires long time to heal. Wound remodeling is an issue. So here you have a small incision, so wound healing is earlier. Complications related to wound, say like wound gaping and all, it is less. Again, astigmatism is less. That is the most key factor. And again, say healing is earlier, so you can give visual rehabilitation in terms of, say you have done a SICS, for a wound to heal in SICS, it will usually take 4 weeks. So if you want to give a final correction, patient bolta hai, I just want to go back to my village, when you will give me glasses. So at least you have to wait for 4 weeks. But here in case of phacoemulsification, usually you can give even at the end of 2 weeks. Right? There can be some minor changes, but usually patient is not functionally curtailed of doing an activity. Right? So that is very important thing you have to keep in mind about the advantages you have with doing a small incision. It is not only sutureless, it is beyond that. Everything from the wound healing to wound related complications to giving your final visual rehabilitation. Again, a very common questions that will be asked, which lens I should go for. Whether you go for an Indian, whether you go for a branded one, so which lens you go for. So again, understand what are the functional requirement of a patient. You have all functional lenses available, a monofocal, multifocal or a toric with an Indian made as well as a branded one or the US made companies. The thing is you have to discuss about the cost issues and you have to understand what is the requirement. See, if your priority is going or traveling from Surat to Ahmedabad in a comfortable manner, you can go even in a Maruti Suzuki, you can go even in a Audi. But think if your priority is comfort, look, cosmesis, then the gear shifts. So this is something one has to keep in mind, what is the requirement. If it is a housewife, if a patient is a player, if a patient is say an IT worker, but has say an astigmatism of 2 diopters, the choice of lens will differ. Right? So it is just not going by the brand, it also has to do with what functions the patient wants. Everybody wants to be spectacle free, but again spectacle free does not mean 100% precision of spectacle freedom. So if you want a precision of spectacle freedom at compromised clarity or crispness of vision, then you have to choose for that. If you are very particular about the crispness or the clarity of vision, you have to end up with a monofocal lens. Again, this is very important. Usually the maids come and ask that there is a camp, give me leave for 5 days and I'll get myself operated completely free of cost. So all government hospitals do a cataract surgery at total free of cost. There is no need for you to. Why not a camp? Because it has to be done in an aseptic precautions. Each instrument, each disposables to be individualized. You cannot do anything in a compromised way, operating 100 patients per day or something like that. Patient's outcome, the eye safety is most important, and that can be compromised when you are crossing your limits. So usually our government, Gujarat guidelines say you don't operate a patient more than 20, or say usually your OT cycle should not be more than 8 hours. There are certain very small minute specifications given to safeguard the outcome of the patient. So everything has to be taken care of rather than you going or being running about something free of cost or a camp surgery marketing. And this again you have to counsel your patients that he or she may get glasses because it depends upon what IOL. Again, with best precision, there can be dioptric shift of +1 to -1 with the monofocal that you have calculated. So some glasses for distance or near can be a normal outcome. Depending upon what technology you are using to decide your IOL power also decides about what can be your residual error of placement of an IOL. So that is it. Thank you.